Hey everybody, my name's Democracy, and I want to welcome you back to our series ranking the Soulsborne boss difficulty. Our last entry in the series is the recently released Dark Souls 3. For our ranking survey, we got over 10,000 responses. That is absolutely incredible, and I am overjoyed with the amount of enthusiasm our community has shown for this series. With the game being so new, keep in mind that opinions are very fresh. The footage you're about to see comes from my first blind playthrough, so those of you disappointed with my lack of deaths in the earlier games are gonna love some of the later totals. With all that said, let's kick things off with number 19. Our first boss is the menaces that await you at the heart of the cathedral, and by that I mean they look kinda menacing. My first reaction walking in here was, what the, please no, FromSoft, you took the gang too far this time. I walked around killing them one by one before noticing the boss's HP wasn't budging, then I noticed the red light. So this is another one of those Royal Rat Vanguard or Celestial Emissary type fights. And those are always super easy, with this one being no different. Just like with the Emissary, at 50% HP the real boss will show his true nature. In this case, it's just another Deacon, but he's protected by the fattest bouncers you've ever seen. At this point, the fight is basically a matter of swatting away the flies to get to the boss, and it's not very hard as long as you employ hit and run tactics because the Deacons do really minimal damage. The only real concern in the fight is the potential to be cursed. I actually had no idea what was going on when the bar started filling up, but if it does, you just drop dead. But apparently all you have to do to stop the fog is kill the Deacons creating it. This means almost any difficulty in this fight has an easy workaround, so you can even take your time if you choose. You probably won't need to though, because once you understand how the fight works, it's a relative cakewalk. So this is the tale of two bosses. The first time I waltzed in here, I tried for about 10 minutes to get a good angle to melee the beast. This was a serious pain in the rear and almost resulted in my own death. I decided to bone out and take the fight on again. The second time I noticed that the area behind the dragon wasn't closed off and gave it a quick look. And then this is basically the fight. That's right, instead of actually fighting a boss, you'll be fighting the little dragon minions as you take a long trip around the arena. So once you do make it all the way around, you just plunge into the head and wow! Yep, that's a one-hit KO, ladies and gentlemen. You know, in some ways I actually applaud FromSoft for trying something different with the dragon boss. We faced quite a few of those across the series, so it's great for them to give a fresh spin on it. It just sucks that it wasn't a challenge at all. Speaking of fights that were disappointing in terms of challenge, we've got YHORM. In the intro cutscene, they really hype up the Lords of Cinder, ending with a badass flaming giant. So when I got to the fight, I was super excited to finally face off against him. There's no way it can be as bad as the last giant in Giant Lord. This is gonna be epic! And in a way, it really was. The freaking Storm Ruler, are you serious? Hell yeah! I love how many throwbacks there are in this game. It feels like they took the best bits of all four and made a love letter to Souls fans. But fan service doesn't always work out for the better, and even though it's great seeing the Storm Ruler, it absolutely obliterates YHORM. It only takes 5 hits, and those hits can be at range, they stun him for quite a bit, and he's also really easy to dodge. So while I was ridiculously satisfied with the weapon, the battle itself is sorely lacking. And so we start our run on the easy early game bosses. I think most would agree that in terms of bosses, the game isn't so bad until you reach your first Lord of Cinder. VORDT reminds me heavily of something you might actually see early in Bloodborne, at least from a mechanic perspective. He's big and he's easy to get under. If you do, you'll have no problem on your way to 50% health. Once there, however, VORDT gets incredibly more aggressive. The most deadly attack he has in his arsenal is this charge. He just goes apeshit and starts charging around the arena 3 to 4 times. If you get stun locked by this, prepare to die. Otherwise, the fight is still a matter of getting under him and punishing. If you can do that, you should have no problem here. Honestly, I think I had more trouble finding this boss than I actually did killing it. No joke, I was lost looking for this sage for the longest time. And I was actually kind of shocked when I walked into the arena, so I kind of just walked up to it and died like an idiot. Once I found my way back though, it was a different story. The Sage has an array of slow charging magic attacks along with one melee strike. That strike does pitiful damage though, so you can kinda just get up in the Sage's face and hack away at it. Eventually it'll teleport and then you just rinse and repeat. There is a point in the fight where it spawns clones, but they're slow to attack and easily distinguished by their blue magic compared to the true Sage's purple magic. I don't think it's a bad boss per se, but it is pretty damn easy. This boss is such a great intro to the experience ahead. I love that you actually have to pull the sword to initiate what you know is about to be your first boss. So how does the fight stack up? It's a decent challenge for the early game, but with a low health pool and heavily telegraphed attacks, it's mostly a breeze for series veterans. The one real challenge in this fight for me was the shock. I actually panicked when I saw his transformation. Most bosses in Soulsborne have some kind of beast mode that they enter when they reach a certain HP level, but I don't ever remember reacting like, wow, what an epic duel with the warrior, I am loving this, to oh my god, what is spewing out of this man? Still, thank God this kind of fight is early in the game, because if he had a more complex moveset and higher aggression, this would be a damn tough fight. Maybe I'm super oblivious, but this boss's entrance also scared the shit out of me. I'm just slaughtering these dudes, maybe expecting some kind of boss like the DEACONS, then the tree I thought was background scenery came to life. After getting over the initial shock, I went to work on his ball sacks. Yeah, I mean, what would you call them? I find that less gross than fungus-grown, rotted, pus-filled mucus orbs. Yeah, this boss is pretty gross. His favorite attack is slamming his ass into the ground while shitting out acid. And eventually the ground gives way under the weight of his nastiness. This was actually pretty cool, but that wears off quickly once his broken balls give birth to a fleshy arm. I'm sorry if I'm being too descriptive, but this boss really just made me want to vomit. But hey, at least he's pretty easy. That, and I don't think anything will ever be worse than unending relief of load. To round out the early game easy bosses, we've got WOLNIR. Now I know, some people find this boss crazy easy, but he did make it almost to the halfway point. So I feel a little less embarrassed to admit this was the first boss I struggled with in a big way. Now, was my struggle because this boss has hard to dodge hits or small Estus windows? Nah, it's because this boss is a leaking poison that will kill you faster than you can blink if you aren't careful. And I'll admit it was 100% my fault because I was being way too greedy in the poison. But I just wanted this dude to die already. Why? Well, he isn't all that fun to fight, honestly. You spend most of the battle chasing his arms around the arena and making sure you don't get stuck in the poison, because all you actually have to do to win is hit those golden bracelets about 5 to 10 times each and then he just dies. So I'd say this isn't as much a battle against tough mechanics, but more like a battle to keep your patience in check. OCEIROS is a boss I felt it's a little early to make an opinion on in terms of lore. He's very vocal throughout the whole fight, screaming about his baby Ocelot, eventually going ham if you do enough damage. Though maybe if he spent less time ranting about his lost child and more time posing an actual challenge, this would be a better fight. I can't really say much for his moves because I spent most of the fight spanking that ass. Yeah, you remember the golden rule for beast bosses? Well, it definitely applies to this dude. I feel like to form a full opinion on the boss, I need a couple more attempts on him, but the early impressions are that he hits decently hard, but leaves immensely large windows for you to attack. That makes him a bit high risk, high reward, and I think the middle of the pack is a good spot for him. The old Demon King reminds me very heavily of the Demon Fire Sage from Dark Souls. Sure, he's got some different moves, like these really cool pulsating AoE attacks, but come on, it's just another big beast dude with a large mace weapon. That doesn't mean he isn't a decent challenge though. He's got a lot of fire damage follow-ups to his swings, and the aforementioned AoE attacks can do some great damage if you're caught off guard. Other than that, there really isn't much to him. He actually ranked 10th in votes for easiest and hardest boss, so I think he can be considered the average baseline for Dark Souls 3 boss difficulty. I think I definitely agree with that because I didn't struggle much with the fights to the point on this list. The fights to come though... What an awesome fight! If you've noticed up to this point, most of the easier bosses were also considered some of the worst. Well, from here on out, we've got the best of the bunch. And to kick that off, we got a throwback to the legendary Ornstein. Freaking amazing. It's hard not to compare this fight to Dark Souls 2 with the old Dragonslayer. That fight rehashed pretty much the same boss from Dark Souls with half the fun. This fight reinvents the boss with a unique way to totally throw the player off. Instead of a fast warrior with a lightning spear, you get a heavy battle axe and a great shield. The battle axe isn't the most difficult thing to dodge due to the major telegraphing, but I had a really hard time avoiding the shield bashes. So while the fight with the armor is a nice challenge, that's bumped up even further by the dragon wispy thing over here that shoots fire at you from a distance. That makes the fight quite a bit more difficult as you have a lot more to dodge. Definitely a solid fight and certainly one of the more memorable ones for me. Do you remember how I mentioned the game's bosses are pretty easy up until the first Lord of Cinder? Well, here we go. The Abyss Watchers are easily the hardest early game challenge. When you walk into the arena, you'll be greeted by one Watcher. His moveset is eerily similar of another beloved series boss. About 20 seconds into your intense duel, another one joins the fray. Damn, this is gonna be brutal. One was hard enough. A third one? Are you kidding me? Wait, is that Red Eyes fighting for me? Yeah, that's right. In a big twist on the tradition of being outnumbered in a boss fight, you actually get help from the boss himself this time. I found it easiest to be highly aggressive against the boss watcher until his buddy shows up. Then you should just play highly defensive until your partner shows up. At that point, go full on aggressive against both of your foes. Just watch out for your friend as he can actually hurt you too. Once they're down, I breathed a sigh of relief. Only to realize that's part one. Coming back to life and brimming with Cinder, the real Watcher fight begins. This fight is similar to the beginning, except there's flaming AoE, more aggression, and harder hits. No doubt this is one of the harder fights in the game for me, but it's also unique, fun, and absolutely gives a feeling of accomplishment once you overcome the challenge. Okay, for the record, if my votes were the only one that mattered, Champion GUNDYR would at least be in the top 3. What makes him so hard after the tutorial doppelganger went down with relative ease? Let's break it down. 1. He is incredibly aggressive, especially in his buff state. I'm not joking when I say I feel like this boss gives you possibly the least moments of downtime in the entire series. I rarely felt like I was safe to heal even directly after dodging one of his moves. 2, he should be called Champion Stunlock. This guy has the ability to knock you on the ground and keep you down for so long. I would tap the roll button and I would stay down for what felt like hours. 3, he has possibly my least favorite move in the entire series. Let's take a look. Once buffed, he gains this quick charge attack. Pretty normal. So what's the matter? You would think that when an enemy goes full sprint at you that if you dodged, he would just keep running past you, right? No, this dude would make a professional athlete jealous with how he cuts on a dime at full speed and rails your ass. With all that aside, this boss would have probably been more easy if I had locked on more, but after playing Dark Souls, I felt more comfortable playing unlocked. One step further, you can actually parry this guy, but I suck at parrying. But with all that in mind, I fucking love this boss. The aggression and elegant moveset he employs reminds me heavily of my favorite bosses in Bloodborne, and this was an adrenaline-filled romp, plain and simple. More like ALDRICH, creator of my frustration. There was probably no boss in the game I got more pissy with than ALDRICH, and that's mainly because I had a piss poor strategy. I love playing highly aggressive, even to the point of trading damage, but this boss plays perfectly against that. Many of his attacks, such as the Purple Rain and the Arrow Barrage, will home in on you. While the Purple Rain isn't too bad, those arrows will freaking decimate you in the blink of an eye. This forces you to spend a large majority of the fight avoiding his attacks from a distance, making good use of the pillars. Once you can bait one of his few melee attacks, you're safe to dodge and get some hits in, but those are few and far between. That's where RNG plays a huge role in this fight. Throughout my 8 battles with ALDRICH, there were 1 or 2 where he was pretty melee heavy, and all the rest he just kept releasing what felt like non-stop arrow barrages. Either way, this fight will definitely test your patience. If you can keep it in check and dodge his spells masterfully, you'll take down this Devourer of Gods. And so we come to the hardest boss in the game, at least for me. Not only in this game, but I died to the Twin Princes more times than any boss across this entire ranking series. I could make all the excuses for why I struggled the most with this boss, but it really boils down to how badly I sucked at dodging LORIAN. Sometimes when I was lucky, this guy would be docile, only swing once, maybe twice, and everything would be great. Other times he would just go teleport crazy and absolutely destroy me. But really, the first half of the fight isn't so bad. LORIAN leaves large windows after attacking, so if you can dodge efficiently, you're good to go. But once you defeat him, he's resurrected by LOTHRIC with a full health bar and a new monkey on his back. Now you get shot with homing spells similar to ALDRICH and a larger soul arrow spell. This is all while LORIAN is still teleporting around like a madman trying to slaughter you. I could consistently get to this phase, but I just panicked when trying to deal with everything going on. The fight only ends once LOTHRIC is dead, and it can be quite a challenge getting him down. But once I did, damn did I jump for joy, and I'm sure many of you out there did too. The Dancer is a deceptively difficult boss to overcome. In the beginning, it didn't really seem that bad to me. The boss leaves large windows of opportunity for you to attack, and it seems like you're in for an easy win. Then the boss buffs and inevitably unleashes the Spin Wheel of Doom. This has gotta be one of the scariest combos I've ever seen in a game. It lasts for what seems like days, it has massive range, and the Dancer tracks you down heavily while doing it. If you don't move, you are surely dead. That move aside, the boss still has some very quick attacks and moves somewhat erratically. It can be difficult to tell when it is and isn't safe to attack. I love it though. A boss that lulls you into a false sense of security then beats you down is a perfect representation of how I think the developers hope the players feel when playing a Souls game. For that, the Dancer is one to remember. If ever there were a perfect fight to conclude a series full of some of the best in gaming, the Soul of Cinder is undoubtedly it. For starters, the battlefield is one of the most memorable in the series. It reeks of all the battles that have been wrought here over the rights to Link the Flame, and that's a perfect setting for what mostly comes down to a PvP-like fight. The catch is, the Soul of Cinder employs an arsenal of so many things from the series. It fights using the Firelink sword as its weapon, it transforms into multiple different weapons like a curved sword, sorcerer's staff, and a spear. He can use pyromancies, sunlight spears, and even has flips reminiscent of the Darkwood Grain Ring. To top it all off, once you defeat him, he summons the strength of Gwyn, the first Lord of Cinder, as a desperate attempt to stop you. This brings out the moveset and music of Gwyn in a moment I think many of us will remember for a long time. So how's the fight itself? Well, it's pretty damn hard. Yeah, how else did you think a foe that has so many tricks up his sleeve would be? He's got so many different moves to learn, he's crazy aggressive, he has a pretty large health pool if you count both phases, and he does massive damage. The best example of this is the devastating 5-hit combo. If you get hit by even one strike, you're stuck in it for the rest, and this combo hurts. The one redeeming factor that probably kept him from a higher ranking is that he can be stunned. If you do enough damage, he drops to one knee, which gives you an opportunity to wail on him or heal. Even so, this fight is without question one of the hardest in the game, but also one of the best. Dear God, I feel lucky making it by PONTIFF in 2 tries. I say that because I recently faced him on a second playthrough and I must have died at least 10 times. That's mainly because this fight can be largely trivialized with parrying, but that's something I've never been good at in Souls. So if you're like me and can't parry, get ready for one of the most unforgiving bosses I've ever encountered. PONTIFF rivals the Dancer for some of the longest combos I've ever seen. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 hits, and other times this dude just unleashes the beast all over you and hits you 1, 2, 3, 4. Seriously, it feels like it never ends. How on earth are you supposed to dodge all that? Well, you better find a way because this guy is only at the halfway point of the game. Speaking of halfway points, PONTIFF will split in 2 halfway through the fight. That's right, you get 2 unrelenting PONTIFFs for the price of 1. But in reality, I actually found the second phase makes PONTIFF a tiny bit easier. This is because his shadow will actually telegraph what PONTIFF is about to do. This means you can take advantage of this to dodge in a timely manner and get some hits in. PONTIFF also seems less aggressive with his doppelganger in tow, so I actually recommend you try not to defeat it because then he goes back to his oppressive self. This is honestly a boss like Gwyn where I almost recommend you learn to parry just for this boss, because you'll save yourself some serious beatdowns. And so we finally reached the uncontested hardest boss in Dark Souls 3. The difficulty height for this dude is really over 9,000. And that's a related reference, but we'll get to that. For starters, you don't even get to the meat of the fight right off the bat. First you gotta face the king while he's riding a freaking dragon. How many fights have looked more intimidating than that right off the bat? So while you balance between lightning strikes, spear slams, and the dragon's flames, you gotta find some time to nail the dragon's face. To be honest, I had the most struggles early on dodging this flame attack. If you don't run away as soon as the dragon flies up, prepare to be fried. But after a little practice, it wasn't so bad taking the dragon down. Then in true Dragon Ball Z fashion, the loss of his comrade propels him to reach new heights of immense power. Just look at this, you're barely able to withstand the force of his strength. And that's a perfect representation for how this fight is about to go. This guy is the encapsulation of every aggressive and hard-hitting boss that's led us here, not to mention his very large health pool. Add that to the fact you've likely spent a ton of Estus just trying to get to the king and you've got a recipe for trouble. However, to play devil's advocate, he does telegraph most of his moves in a generous way. The problem is that with how hard he hits, if you mistime a single roll, you'll likely need to scramble to heal or face defeat. Let's just say there's a reason this guy is optional. If FromSoft is going to conclude Dark Souls, they've got to add some fights that are memorable, and this is one for the difficulty record books. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed ranking the difficulty of the Dark Souls 3 bosses with me. I really do feel like the Dark Souls series is such an enigma. In an era where many games are pandering to the idea of accessibility for massive sales, these games were brave enough not only to challenge players, but to downright punish them. And out of that spawned a community that loved everything about it, the lore, the PvP, and of course, the bosses. It's really bittersweet to see that come to an end. On one hand, it's incredibly sad to see something we love conclude, but I feel so happy that the game delivered on so much of what the community wanted to see. So while this may be the end of Dark Souls, the community will help the series live on. And at this point, FromSoft has spawned their own genre. Maybe we'll see more things like Bloodborne in the future. But for now, I'm signing off from the Boss Ranking series. If you've enjoyed it, I encourage you to subscribe as I'm planning other Soulsborne content. And of course, if you're interested in Fallout and Skyrim, I'll be continuing those series for the long haul. This series would not have been possible without the help of you guys, so I just want to say thank you. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video!